Hello everybody and welcome to episode 8 of building an Imperial Refinery in LEGO. In this episode I double the terrain as well as get a really good portion of the pit done. I'm getting close to finishing that, but for all this progress I will need some pieces. So without further ado, let's get into an overview of all the orders I have received in the past couple of weeks. This is a lot of pieces to put together, so let's get right into a time lapse. Okay everybody, so after the time lapse I was able to attach almost all of these top panels for the pit, but sadly I will have to remove them and reattach them because I have to add a 1x2 cheese slope onto that bracket piece to secure the angle better. And if you can see, all of these ones are the ones without the cheese slope, and there are slight gaps and differences in angle, while if I take a look at these ones, the ones that have the cheese slopes, there are much less gaps and angle differences. And it also helps align these front panels, which is another change to the design. and this one's a lot bigger, because every other exterior wall panel had to be replaced with a version that is a total of a plate thinner, or half a plate on each side. The way I was able to achieve this was replacing the bracket pieces there with snot bricks down here, and the reason I had to move them down was to connect to this. It was a lot more complicated than I hoped. And then to get the 5-plate center down here, I just shrunk one of the sides by a plate. Pretty simple, but overall, very annoying to have to redesign this again. The reason I actually had to redesign these exterior wall panels was because although I had designed it and double-checked that it would go all the way, because of the slight angle differences in the entire pit, and just how kind of inconsistent the shape is, although it looks pretty much perfect, there's just slight offsets every once in a while, that it was much easier to have this plate less than have the overcrowding, which wasn't even that bad, but it pushed it just beyond the limits of what I felt was a good design, so had to change that. The third to last change, I know there's a lot of changes, but the third to last is the gap filler. The previous design here is a 2-plate thick size, or the gap needed for it to fill is 2 plates thick, while the new gaps are 1.5 plates, so I have to redesign those gap fillers to fit the new gaps along the edge all the way around, so that's kind of an annoying task to handle, but nothing that I shouldn't be able to figure out. Next is a change that isn't really a change. I'm just removing this hinge brick and connecting these panels to the interior wall of the pit, so it has a more consistent shape, pretty much, and more consistent angles for the exterior walls onto the interior walls. Anyways, the final change to the pit is the wall design for these small walls that will be on the platform. I have not refined the design yet, but it'll be something like this, just to have that indent or overhang on these top panels, unlike the old design where they were flush. And so I had to redesign that. Still a work in progress, but we'll hopefully have that design by next episode. Moving up to the last bit of progress I was able to make on this whole pit was the pillar, which is pretty much just rebuilding what I had already done in episode 3, which, if you have not seen episode 3 or the earlier episodes of this series, I would definitely recommend going and checking them out, not only to get the full build process of this mock, but also to see some designs that I had to take apart and will still eventually be using for this mock. And some of them, like this pillar design, are really cool, and it will give you a sneak peek at what is to come in future episodes. Now, moving very slightly away from the pit, I have a few small details over here that may or may not stay, and some really nice terrain, probably my favorite terrain of the mock. It's tied for some terrain that you will see down in the cave progress that I have done this episode, but these new pieces, which you saw in the hall, were these curved slopes in medium nougat, dark orange, and tan, which just makes this intersection with the pit wall so nice, and it just is a really smooth piece of terrain in my opinion, and I'm really happy with this mesa terrain. I love how it's turning out, and although it looks nice from the side. I had to get a little complicated with the intersection with the pit, so there is a little bit of mess that I had to cover up. As you can see from that disaster, there was a gap, some filler pieces that I needed to cover. Overall, pretty complicated intersection on that top level, but no big deal. You can just cover up with some kind of interesting design like that. And the top is very flat. You can probably tell it's even flatter than that section, and I'm not too sure if I want to actually redo some of this. I'm super low on dark orange wedge plates, and this will be the last place I will use them. This is all going to be really slopey up all the way to about there, and I will be using very little, if any, wedge plates on that. And because I'm so low, I'd need to order just a few, and if I end up seeing them, I'll grab them and probably redo a little bit of this, but I only have about next episode at the latest to do that, so probably we'll keep it flat and just add some various details to make it feel a little more leveled, layered. But I'm really happy with how these medium nougat sections turned out in this terrain section. This is something I talked about last episode, which is this water evaporator, I think. And I'm still not sure about the placement. You can see it is a lot better further away from the pit. It makes the pit still seem very big, and this kind of still seems a little big versus the pit. So I'm still deciding whether I want to maybe not even include this, even though I love the design, or if I should move it. And I'm really kind of stuck because I don't really have room over here, which is the best place, would be like right where this mound is, and up here it just adds more height to it, and kind of in a tough spot. But let me know if you think it should go over here somewhere, or over here somewhere, or if I should just not include it. Moving down to the cave, you can kind of see why this was my favorite section of terrain. This little, like, kind of peninsula thing here, I just love how it turned out with that scoop in on the tan level that just kind of fades into the flat section, and I think it's just a really cool piece of terrain. And then also on this wall over here, although pretty flat, still very nice. If I can get some light directly in there, that might be too bright. So, there we go. You can see there are explosives on that wall, which is actually the exterior pit wall that the Mandalorians down here are trying to blow through to get into the refinery pit. Now, the kind of side perspective on this whole terrain, I went with a lot simpler than the other side, which has a lot of cheese slopes and variation, while this side I went a lot chunkier, mainly just because I was running out of pieces, but also because this section I don't really care about as much. I'll mostly be showing off the cave, and this whole thing right here will probably not be shown very much on camera, so I'm not too mad about that. The last thing I want to talk about is this wall right here that will be angled upwards and intersect somewhere up here and extend onto the next part of this mock. Now, this whole wall is very, very complicated. Because of how the pit was built, the angle changes very slowly, and it's a constant change because of the wall moving backwards, and pretty much I have a triple angle to pull off. One, intersecting the pit at the correct angle. Two, kind of angling it and filling the gaps. Overall, really complicated to pull off. Hopefully I can get it done. I might have to kind of cheat and just fill it somehow with various little pieces and dark orange covering most of it. Hopefully I don't have to do that, but I will get these pit wall sections on, maybe even start up the pillar up here, and just kind of see where I have to intersect the wall and just everything like that. Then I will decide if it needs to have some kind of fill that doesn't look the best, or if I can actually pull off that angling all the way up, which in my opinion would be pretty awesome. Ending off the episode, I have a little bit of bad news that I guess isn't really bad news, and then a little bit of good news after that. The bad news is I will actually have to be shrinking the full size of this MOC. If you did not know, the portion I'm working on is actually only half of what I planned on making, but because of how many parts this first half is taking, I'm going to have to shrink that next base plate kind of thing to about half of the intended size, which will make the overall size of the MOC 3/4 of what I planned on. Now, this is still not a small MOC by any means. This is probably one of my biggest. Felucia was still probably bigger, but overall, not a huge deal. But good news after that is that next episode will not be delayed, unlike this one, for reasons of orders, because I actually have progress I can make on the pit and terrain before I have to order pieces, which I will be doing soon, so don't worry about having to wait for another episode of building an Imperial Refinery in LEGO. Anyways, that is going to wrap up this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing with notifications on so you don't miss episode 9 of building an Imperial Refinery in LEGO. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.